contenders. Let's say we'll do the title contenders, even the playoff teams of the NBA. And the other side of it is that, an X factor for one team is, more, let's say, important than an X factor for, let's say, one of the worst teams in the NBA. You know what I mean? So make sure you do like the video if you do like the video, and comment down below maybe an X factor from your favorite team. And by X factor, I just mean a player who, if this player plays a certain way, it takes the team to a whole different level. I'm not talking about the best player on the team. Example for the Nets, if KD is the X factor for the Nets, KD's not the X factor for the Nets. He's not going to change the way he plays. He's always going to be great. I'm talking that player that will really shift the tides of your team. If this player does play well, make sure you comment that down below. And yeah, like I said, like the video, subscribe to the channel, obviously. And yeah, I think that's everything. So let us finally get started. Alright, so the first player that we have here, well, I guess we could do the first team we have here. Again, kind of just thinking about teams that are, you could say, title contenders, but definitely more of the playoff-bound teams, at least this early on in the NBA season. For the first team, we have, of course, the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm going to say this team's X factor player, the player that if he plays good can really elevate his team to a different level, I would have to say Clint Capella. Yes, maybe the third best player on this Atlanta Hawks team. Definitely has had some high highs and some low lows playing in Atlanta. He is averaging, only 12 points per game, 13.5 rebounds, which is definitely pretty fire, and he's also averaging 1.5 blocks as well. So I would say playing very average for a Clint Capella. I will say, if Clint Capella is playing at his best, I feel like this Atlanta Hawks team is very hard to not only, go at because of the lob threat of Trae Young and Clint Capella, but also, quite obviously, the defensive effect that Clint Capella can have when he's really logged in on that defensive end. And of course, when you look around, not only the NBA, but maybe their, rival, maybe over there in Philadelphia, having a big who can guard, well, at least try to guard Joel Embiid, really makes a big difference. You know what I mean? So, I think Clint Capella, pretty good X Factor pick for the Atlanta Hawks. Up next, we have the Boston Celtics, and this team could definitely have a couple of X Factor players. I feel like this roster is, I don't want to say weirdly constructed, but obviously you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, really good sort of 1-2 punch there, so obviously you can't really go after those guys. Those guys I feel like are usually pretty consistent. Sometimes Jason Tatum isn't, and that's probably the only fault you can put at Jason Tatum is that some nights you'll, score 40 points in the game, and then a couple of games later you'll score 11 points, you know what I mean? But I feel like Dennis Schroeder is a little bit more of an iffy subject because, again, he is averaging, I think, 17 points per game? 70 points per game, 5 assists. Pretty average for Dennis Schroeder, and I love what he's doing so far in Boston, but man, if and when this team gets to the playoffs, at least what I feel, hopefully they make the playoffs, he is really going to be the X factor for that team and how far they go, because again, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I feel like if they do get there healthy, which again I'll knock on wood for them, they're really also going to need a lot of help from the others of Boston, and of course, having another guy who isn't going to get smothered by the defensive end of their opposing team, obviously going to be focusing on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Dennis Schroeder has to be that guy who can really basically that's maybe the biggest X factor in the entire NBA. If Kyrie Irving can play, that big three returns with that crazy team they built there in Brooklyn, it might be a GG. But I think with him out, obviously, of course, it's all up in the air for, the title right now. But again, Kyrie Irving, if he plays, that's maybe the biggest X factor in the entire NBA. But let's say I can't pick him. I think it's definitely probably Patty Mills. Of course, Patty Mills being that guy they were expecting to come off the bench, being that sort of crazy six-man veteran role. He is averaging 12 points per game, 2.5 assists. Definitely not the craziest, but that's what his role is. It's just a scorer off the bench. But obviously, if Kyrie Irving isn't playing, he's really going to have to be very important to be able to not only help this team, but put this team over the hump of winning a title when there's so many deep teams in the NBA. Definitely, Brooklyn's not being one of them. Very top heavy. Because you still need a good bench to win a title. And, if he doesn't show up, that's going to be really rough on them. But if I can't say him, I'll probably say Patty Mills. We're on to the Charlotte Hornets. And with the Hornets, of course, the consistency of Miles Bridges, that's going to be a very big thing. If, obviously Miles Bridges can keep this crazy streak he's been on until the entire year is done and over with. So hopefully he can do that, but I don't really find that as an X factor. For me, it was between two guys, and it's between the forwards of Gordon Hayward or Kelly Oubre Jr. And again, counting more on the veteran all-star Gordon Hayward, I'm going to say my X factor on if this guy can stay consistent would be Kelly Oubre Jr. Now, Kelly Oubre Jr. has played pretty well in his role set there in Charlotte already, averaging 15 points per game, which is the only reason why he's there is because he is a scoring machine. He is also averaging 38% for threes, which is also super important for him to stay consistent at the three-point shot. Hopefully, Kelly Oubre can be, again, that X factor and bring that sort of two-way capability, but mostly scoring is what this team is looking for. And if he can stay consistent at that, with also, again, Hayward, Rozier, Ball, Bridges, all bring that together, in my opinion, that team can maybe beat any team in the Eastern Conference in a 7-game series if everything is 100%, which obviously it never is in the NBA. But man, if this team clicks at the right moment in time, this team could be the 2021 Atlanta Hawks rebirth, I guess you could say, if they play very fiery hot at the end of the year, boom into the playoffs. That's going to be a dangerous team for any team to go up against. Now we're on to the Chicago Bulls. And for the Bulls, kind of a hard one to actually pick because, again, their three-headed monster of Levine, DeRozan, and Vucevic are all somewhat, I would say, very consistent players. And you have Lonzo Ball in there, who's definitely looking a lot better than in previous years. And I don't know if it's either Alex Caruso, the defensive edge guard, or Kobe White, the more offensive gifted shooting guard. And I'm assuming that when he does come back, he's going to be playing out that off-guard spot next to Alex Caruso. I think I'm going to say Kobe White might be the biggest X factor for Chicago. If Kobe White can return and be, let's say, a 15-point per game scorer for this team off the bench, while also, like I said, having a crazy defensive guard, a crazy smart defensive guard, and Alex Caruso right next to him, I feel like that could actually be very important to this team's success, especially in a playoff series. Now, Kobe White has only played 9 games this entire year, so again, like I said, once we can get a little bit more of a consistent look at Kobe White, then maybe we can reevaluate him a little bit better. But in those 9 games, only averaging 6 points, definitely not the Kobe White you were hoping for. But last season he was averaging 15 points. I know he was starting back then, but all I'm saying is with a team that has a more diverse play style, I think he still will be able to get a lot of playoff series. Of course, they still lost, but man, I don't know, man. I feel like they are definitely a team that I think is ready to have a good run, and it's just really up to the others around Luka Doncic. And this season, Kristaps is averaging 20 points per game, 8 rebounds. Still basically that same old Kristaps Porzingis player, but you know, it's just when the moment matters, can the Mavericks, not only Luka Doncic, trust Kristaps Porzingis? And I don't know, it's hard to think of seeing Kristaps Porzingis in a big time game moment where they need a basket. Luka kicks out to Kristaps for a three, and even myself, I don't know if I could trust him doing that, and I would just really hope that, hopefully, again, being that X factor, he can sprout into that, finally, that Robin to Luka's Batman player, and really have a good run in these upcoming playoffs. So, that's all I can really hope for, but obviously, the head of it, it's definitely Kristaps Porzingis, and again, we all know, if it was Knicks, Kristaps Porzingis, this team would probably be a true title contender, not only just a team that has hopes for one. Man, I don't even know if I should be mentioning this team right now, but they still are in that contention area, so I'll give it to them. The Denver Nuggets, and of course with Denver having a bunch of missing pieces, I think of course the return of Jamal Murray, definitely a big X factor for this franchise right now. If he can come back and be, you know, at least a solid contributor, this Denver Nuggets team will definitely have a chance in the playoffs for sure, at least having a chance to be in the playoffs, definitely. But I think for an active player, this also might be an easy one. I think it definitely has to be Aaron Gordon. If Aaron Gordon can really help try to be from going from the maybe fourth option from the team to now being the number 2 option now that Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are out. Oh my goodness, it's very tough for Jokic, and if Aaron Gordon can, you know, somehow turn back the clock to his Arizona days where he was, you know, gonna be that number 1 guy for a new franchise and everything about him was looking really good. Hopefully we can see a little bit of that, and I mean his game is good. He's a stretch 4. He can defend. He still has all that athleticism still, a little, well, not as much, but it's definitely enough to get the job done. So, like I said, if he can just turn back the clock and really, you know, become more consistent, become more efficient on scoring, if he can become like a 20-plus point per game scorer, that would be so amazing and so helpful for this really banged up Denver Nuggets team. Really about Jokic a lot, so probably my take for biggest X factor for them. We have the Golden State Warriors next, and for them, pretty tough. I think for them, of course, Klay Thompson, again, kind of like the other teams I was talking about, when he comes back, how healthy he can be, definitely, you know, up there with Kyrie Irving as one of the biggest X factors in the NBA right now. If Klay comes back and he's, God, 80, 90, 100% to Klay Thompson, I think what I might say is a returning of another injured player. And I think a pretty big X factor is how James Wiseman can return to this team and help them out. The only thing the Warriors are really lacking is a big and someone who can, you know, help try at least stopping the bigs of the NBA, like an Ayton, an Embiid, a Jokic, someone who could just at least stay in the way of these guys. And Wiseman is the only piece they're missing right now. If he can come back, but also contribute on, you know, most of the defensive end, but also on the offensive end, being able to stretch the floor still with being kind of a stretch 5. Man, if he can come back and be like a 15-point per game scorer, stretching the floor, defensive minded, oh my goodness, man. Again, this Warrior team might be a GG on the season. I don't know. Los Angeles Clippers. Oh man, that's also kind of a tough one. I really don't know. Well, I do know it's the others of the Clippers, not counting Kawhi if he does come back fully healthy, which again, another X factor like Kyrie and blah 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 blah. We got the story. It could be, you know, someone like Terrence Mann who had a pretty crazy end to last year, kind of having a big coming out party, scoring 40 points in a playoff game, which is pretty dope. But this year hasn't really shown that he is still at that same level. Now, if he hits that level sometime during this year, that a season, a lot of lows throughout a season. It's just where he hits at the end of the year is what's really biggest for this team. And as of so far, it's been pretty, meh to below meh, at least in my eyes. He's had some good games. Like I said, he looks like, triple-double Russell Westbrook some night, and then sometimes he looks like a regular, role player, if I'm being completely honest. So, man, if he can just really lock in, this team could be so good. It's just really coming down to him. LeBron's playing great. AD's definitely getting, more and more consistent on being, that defensive monster. Anthony Davis, that catching lob. Anthony Davis, that almost go-to guy for the Lakers. Anthony Davis, but hopefully that can just stay the way it is. Number one, no doubt about it, Russell Westbrook. Again, if he can just really get into a good groove, one of the biggest X factors in the entire NBA. I'll do a Memphis Grizzly one because they are sort of again in that playoff fighting area. Memphis, Dillon Brooks, that's a pretty easy one. We saw at the end of last season having that crazy defensive game against Steph Curry. If he can stay that consistent on defense when he does come back from his injury, and also adding that offensive game of being a 3-and-D shooter, I mean, that's exactly what Memphis needs to play alongside John Morant for years to come. Jaren is finally starting to look more and more like, previous Jaren Jackson Jr. I said before, man. Jaren has the potential to be, one of the future's best bigs in the NBA, but for a long stretch there, especially after he came back from his injury, man, he looked like a bona fide role player, but now he's finally to get into more of that role. I will say, Dillon Brooks, if he can really lock in alongside John Morant, alongside a more, normal Jaren, that Memphis team might be playoff bound. For the Miami Heat, I'll probably say Victor Oladipo when he comes back. If Victor Oladipo can come back and look stellar, that would be crazy. Because of course, again, you have that crazy guard play already with Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero. Then you add in Victor Oladipo to that, man. That'd be really good. And for Miami, man, their depth is just crazy, like crazy bad. I mean, I remember watching one of their other games, and someone who would like to think watched a lot of basketball, I didn't even know who they were playing in that game. I looked at the screen, I was like, who even are these guys? So adding depth more would be great, and also with a healthy Victor Oladipo, if he can at least do something important to the Miami Heat, I think that's what they're really looking for. That's why he's there. I think that's probably the biggest X factor there for me. For the Milwaukee Bucks, oh man, I don't even really know what I would even say for the Bucks, because obviously Giannis is just always going to be stellar, and even with Chris Middleton, always going to be really good. Man, you know what? I actually really don't know. Maybe someone, maybe like Brook Lopez, just like a guy who can really, again, sort of push them over the edge if he stays more consistent on defense, because again, having a big who can guard the bigs, that's also really important to pretty much the Bucks, really, because Giannis doesn't really guard bigs, at least if I can remember. I don't think he really guards the big. It's mostly Brook Lopez when he's doing that, so I think that's pretty important. That's also a pretty good, maybe I could say Dante DiVincenzo, but I think Brook Lopez is a pretty good one. Again, for the New York Knicks, kind of going off of my previous rule, I'm going to say RJ Barrett is their biggest X factor, which is kind of sucky to say that because, again, another season, and at least for me personally, I'm still hoping to see a breakout season for RJ Barrett, something that he can finally, be a consistent 20-point per game scorer, a consistent 3-and-D type of player, and he can't get out of that glass ceiling. This season he's averaging 14 points, 6 rebounds, like he's doing good, like he's playing good. But I'm assuming if you're also a Knicks fan, you're expecting RJ to be maybe at one point in time your go-to scorer. RJ just either is going to or is going to have to prove that he has that talent, because otherwise being a 14 point per game scorer when you're looked at to be maybe the next franchise guy is just looking I feel like he's definitely plateaued in his career, and I don't think he's going to get any better than where he is right now, and that does suck. But Nurkic, for the Blazers at least, loves to move the ball. We love to play through Nurk a lot, and I think he is a very underrated passer in the NBA. He is an underrated post scorer. He can do a lot of things. It's just that, some games he has these crazy peaks, and then a lot of games he'll have like 8 points and 10 rebounds, and he'll have a block, which is cool, but like, I really wish he was a consistent threat, and that's what he's not. So I'll say he's such a big X factor for this Blazers team that could really push him over the top, having a three-headed monster like that. But I'll say he's probably the biggest X factor for me. For the Utah Jazz, that's also kind of a tough one, sort of just like an all-around team. I don't even really know. It's just whoever that third option guy can be for Utah. So maybe Bogdanovich. Could it be Jordan Clarkson? I think the X factor is whoever fills that X factor role, whether it is Clarkson or Bogdanovich, Joe Ingles, who could ever be that third option. That is the most X factor thing about the Utah Jazz, is that we all know the two-headed monster of that Utah Jazz team is insane with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Like, that's their bread and butter, but the rest of the team is good. It's deep, but they're all very evenly leveled. When, the other two are way up here, you wish there was a guy who could close that gap, and again, whoever does, I feel like is the biggest X factor. The Washington Wizards. Oh man, that's tough. I mean, the Wizards are a crazy story for this year so far, and man, I honestly have no idea. I guess if I could say maybe Montrezl Harrell, his X factor is that if he can continue on this crazy streak, because I mean, I've seen on Twitter people saying that this guy should be an all-star this year, which is crazy, but hey, some people are believing it, so I don't know. I'd say probably, yeah, if Montrezl Harrell can keep this up, obviously with bringing Bradley Beal, and the rest of that crazy core of Spencer Dinwiddie and Kuzma and all the other role players they have, this team could definitely make a splash. And if Montrezl Harrell can keep this up and can show that, hey, that this time at the Lakers was not the end of his career, that could be very special for them. There are a couple other teams who are in that playoff area, but I don't know if they're going to be staying there all that long. I mean, of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers are sixth right now in the NBA East, but I don't know how long they're going to stay there. But I mean, I guess maybe the biggest X factor for them, oh man, obviously with Colin Sexton out, it might just be honestly how well actually it's probably Evan Mobley, but definitely how well Garland can stay this sort of primary guard role now that Sexton's gone. He is the offense of this team basically. And I guess you could say Toronto too, and Toronto I think is, of course, again, kind of like with the Cleveland Cavaliers, is just how well Scotty Barnes can keep this up, because man, he's looking like a crazy good player. And also on the flip side of that, what happens with Pascal Siakam? He's definitely a big X factor, because if he stays on that team, will it hurt them? Will it help them if they trade for a better fit player? Will that be a good thing? Well, man, it's definitely tough there to be a Toronto Raptor fan, because I'm sure there's a bunch of different people who want a bunch of different things, and you can't please everyone. So I bet that's pretty big, guys. I think that's most of the teams I wanted to talk about and their X factors, and how they could really push them from being, solid NBA teams. Maybe even some other teams are more than solid, but and can really push them over the edge on what players, if they can just really hit their true potential, their good stride, can really push them over the top. And I think there's a lot of really good players there that are pretty obvious, but some players and teams have some tougher ones. So I'm sorry if I got kind of confusing there. So hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you are nice and relaxed. Hopefully this was something for you. And make sure you do like the video if that was you, and comment down below maybe some other X Factor players that you can think of. And yeah, just subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow I'm going to be posting a regular ASMR video, a non-sports video, so that should